Wonderful. So I don't want to delay us too much. I know that we all want to hear what our speakers have to say. So again, my name is David Hay-Menendez, and I am the Executive Director of Pennsylvania Interfaith Power and Light. We have two speakers today talking to you about plastics and their harms on our health. I hope many of you had the opportunity to view the film Story of Plastic. The link that you received should be accessible until August 1st. So if you did not yet see it, or if you would like to see it again, please feel free to use that link, but it will be deactivated as of August 1st. The film is actually provided to us by the distributor for free. So your donations that were given to PIPL, if you chose to make one, we will be giving them a portion of those donations as well to support their wonderful work. As I said, we have two wonderful speakers, one of whom, our board member, Dee Kochirka, is a registered nurse. As I said, a PIPL board member from Pittsburgh, a member of the Isaac Walton League Association of Allegheny County, of which she is the vice president, and an active environmental activist. Our second speaker will be Dr. Patricia DeMarco, who is a biologist, author, educator, policy expert, community leader, and environmental activist. She is also in Pittsburgh, where she is a local elected official. She serves on the board of directors for the Allegheny Land Trust and for the Battle of Homestead Foundation. She is also formerly a PAIPL Visionary Award recipient from 2018, correct, Dr. Marco? Yes. Slightly before I began at PIPL, but I am very happy that she is still working with us and actively participating in our programming, and will be here for us tonight to share her wonderful breadth of knowledge, and Dee as well, being able to speak from her experience working in Pittsburgh, both in the health field and, as I said, in activism more broadly. So before we launch fully into the presentation for tonight, because this is our statewide meeting, I just wanted to give space for anybody that wanted to ask any questions, either about PIPL, the work we do, or if you have any suggestions about things that you would like to see PIPL do across the state. Now would be the time to speak up. As I said, all of you have the ability to unmute yourself at any time, but I would also request that people stay muted unless they have something specific or they have caught the attention of myself or one of the speakers. If you are joining, sorry, do you have a state conference? Yes, we do. So our state conference will be in November this year. We're actually planning it right this second. Traditionally, it has been around that time of the year, but back in 2018, it took place in the early part of the year, actually. Our focus will likely be on climate justice, which is a central focus of the IPL more broadly, but we want to especially highlight it this year in this year's conference. And we are considering making it a distributed conference. So no matter where you are in Pennsylvania, there will be a PAIPL conference opportunity within stone's throw, let's say. Most likely it'll be in Pittsburgh, in Philadelphia, and maybe State College or Harrisburg or somewhere else in central Pennsylvania. I don't know if the board will let me have it in Lewisburg, but that is where I live. What can we realistically do now about Reggie? Kane is my senator and only focused on jobs. That is a great question, Brenda. I would say three things. One, please, if you haven't yet registered for our monthly policy update with our policy manager, Amani Reed. It is every fourth Thursday of the month. It is actually changing times from 12:30 to 5 p.m. and she will always bring out quite a lot of good information. We are also currently doing lobby visits. We have one this coming week with Dan Miller. Next week, we have one with Congressman Lamb, and we have several others scheduled for coming weeks. We've been doing these for the last several weeks, and we will be continuing to do so, especially through the summer. Beyond directly lobbying statewide and local elected officials, which is always important, Phyllis, who's on the call here, and I were just talking earlier about getting letter writing up and going in a more robust way across Pennsylvania, which I would invite all of you to do. I think both Patty and I can easily say that getting a lot of letters and getting a lot of things in the newspapers, especially local newspapers, actually does have an effect on local elected officials, because we will hear it. If something's in the paper about something I did or something my borough council is doing, of which I sit, I absolutely get clippings, I get links sent to me, I get emails telling me about the article that was in the paper. I mean, it is definitely a realistic amount of pressure that is exerted on people. Speaking specifically to Reggie, I would say that not only are jobs a very important and palpable result of Pennsylvania joining Reggie potentially, so that should be the forefront of what you speak to your elected officials about, but also something that's come about as a result of these lobby visits is talking to members of both parties and trying to make sure that any legislation that moves forward, any policy changes that take place, including Reggie, have to have members of both parties. That if you only have Democrats or if you only have Republicans, it is very hard to move things through the Pennsylvania legislature at this point. So between a groundswell from the people, especially from people of faith, congregations, people of conscience, and making sure that you get people from both sides of the aisle, that's the path forward. That's literally practically the only path forward at this time for Reggie and for several other policy initiatives that are in the works. But you can absolutely hear more about that at our monthly advocacy policy call. I would recommend that you sign up for it if you aren't already. And then Edward said, capital formation investment no longer equals jobs due to the fourth industrial revolution. Yeah, that's a much larger conversation to have, Edward, but thank you. Is there any specific questions about PIPL or any programs that you would like us to pursue, any topics that you would like us to pursue? We're also constantly looking for congregations, groups, individuals who have shovel-ready projects, because oftentimes we have grants to apply for, but we don't necessarily have a project that fits it ready and set to go. So if you have a pet project, if you have an idea, if you have a congregation that wants to do something, I'm the person to come to, and we can try to help you make that a reality. Okay. So without any further ado, I would like to again welcome Dee Kochirka, one of PIPL's board members, and I will start sharing my screen so that you can all see her wonderful PowerPoint presentation. Take it away, Dee.
There we go. As a nurse, I really enjoy helping people to maintain their health, but it's difficult to stay healthy if you live in an unhealthy environment. And then a few years ago, I saw this film about plastics and how it's polluting the environment. Yet we still keep making more and more of this product. Plastics and their production is doing harm, the way it's manufactured, how we use it, and how we dispose of it. So tonight, I would like to share with you some of the harmful effects of plastics. We can go to the next slide, please. To begin with, I'll start with how plastics are made. Plastics are made from ethane, which is a liquid fossil fuel. These fuels formed millions of years ago and are found deep in the earth in layers of shale rock and are extracted by drilling wells and fracking them. We can go to the next slide, please. So here's an example of this process. So they drill a well and they can go down a mile into the earth before they hit this rock formation. Fracking involves dumping massive amounts of water. So millions of gallons of water are pressurized into the well and they fracture the rock. So if you think of like a fractured bone, it forms cracks in the rock, and then the gas and oil are able to seep through those cracks. But when we flush out this gas, we're also flushing out everything else that's been down there for millions of years. So fresh water goes into the well, but it's contaminated water that flows back. Now, this pumped out water, this flowback water, contains radioactive materials, heavy metals, and other toxic chemicals. And examples are like benzene and toluene, which are known carcinogens. Frack water also contains uranium. Uranium is the most toxic element on the planet, and it is radioactive. The second most toxic element on the planet is mercury. That is not radioactive. But this fracked radioactive water is then transported in diesel trucks and taken to the local municipalities' treatment plants, where it can seep into the groundwater and get into your drinking water, because these facilities are not equipped to deal with radioactive waste and toxic chemicals. Some of the frack water they will take and put it in abandoned vacant wells. This in areas where they've been fracking, like down in Oklahoma and northern Texas, have experienced tremors, earthquake-like activity since they've been dumping radioactive water back into these wells. Now, it not only contaminates the water, but also the air. This continual parade of diesel trucks that keeps removing all this wastewater destroys the community's roadways, and it contributes to the air pollution. These trucks run 24 hours a day, and it's just a continual parade of diesel trucks going through these communities. People in these communities suffer from respiratory problems like asthma, emphysema, and lung cancer. But it's not only lung cancer, but cancer of all forms and rare childhood cancers like Ewing sarcoma. We have a local high school here, Canon McMillan, which has 6 children in the school that have Ewing sarcoma. Now, this bone cancer is so rare, it occurs in one in a million. And we have 6 children in the same high school with this cancer. But the oil industry claims this is a safe practice. So we look to areas like Texas and Louisiana, where they've been fracking for many, many years, and they have the highest rates of cancers in that area, so much so that they're referred to that area as Cancer Alley. Now, this whole fracking industry is attempting to move up into Western Pennsylvania area. Now, there's not only health problems that are related to the fracking industry, but also the cracker plant production. So I'm clear, when we look at this, when you remove this gas and oil, they take the products and separate the gas and send that off to a refinery, and then separate the waste products and send that off to the municipal waste dump sites. So once the refinery gets these gas products like methane, ethane, butane, propane are examples, all they really want is the ethane. That's what they're going to use to make the plastics. So the methane, which is a very toxic greenhouse gas, it's far more toxic than CO2. They just flare it. So they just burn it off and let it go into the atmosphere. The ethane is what they save to make plastic pellets, which are the building blocks of plastic products. So by adding heat and pressure to ethane, along with chemicals, they make plastic pellets. So if you take a molecule of ethane and you heat it at extremely high temperatures, I'm talking like 1800 degrees, you will crack the molecular bonds of ethane. When you crack a molecule of ethane, it forms ethylene, and polyethylene is plastic. So these little tiny pellets that form are called nurdles. They load millions of them into silos, ship them down the river and off to factories throughout the world where the plastic production occurs. The problem is these little pellets, these little nurdles that are made are so tiny. And some is not even pellet formation. It's like little BBs or lentils, that size. Some of them are like flakes. So it's like trying to contain sawdust, and it escapes from the containers, and it escapes during the transportation problem to different facilities. Now, these nurdles, when they escape into the atmosphere, into the air, and into the water, can absorb chemicals in the environment, such as DDT, which is a banned insecticide, but it's still present in our environment. And these nurdles kind of are like magnets for these chemicals. Other chemicals they have found in the nurdles are like PCBs, which are industrial chemicals, and also mercury. There are 250,000 tons of nurdles that enter the ocean each year. And, then the marine life eats that, and then we eat the fish. Now, the cracker plant that makes these nurdles, these precursors, also emits its CO2 in massive amounts. So the one that we have here in Beaver County will emit half the amount of CO2 than the entire city of Pittsburgh. So just one cracker plant can emit the amount of CO2 that half the city would in a year. It's a huge facility. It's just this giant chemical plant. It's on almost 400 acres of land. In addition to the CO2 that it's emitting, this cracker plant will require the addition of 1,000 new frack wells every year it's producing to feed it with enough of this ethane to make the plastics. So fracking and cracking go hand in hand. Both these industries contribute to massive amounts of green gases. And all this contamination, all these problems are present before we've even made a single plastic product. This is just the beginning of plastic production. You can stop the slideshow for a moment there, David. Okay, so let's look at some plastic products. Both of these products are similar, okay? Similar shape, similar size. What's the difference? It's the amount of chemicals. It's the chemicals that we are adding to these products that affects them. For instance, when you add a chemical such as BPA, bisphenol A, it's a hardening agent. Other chemicals that we add, like phthalates, are softening agents. And it's this flexibility with these plastic products that we can make so many different things from is what we really like about plastics. The problem is, once you make this stuff, you can't get rid of it because plastics are here forever. They simply do not break down in landfills. So what do we do with all this? Once we fill up our landfills, then we just start dumping all these products into the ocean. So let me give you an example here. This spoon, this will sit in a landfill for 100 years. A water bottle that we use, these are products that we use for what? A few minutes, and then they stay in the environment for hundreds of years. Some plastic products can take up to 500 years to break apart in a landfill. And we keep making more and more of them. We're just running out of places to put them. So then we just start dumping them into the ocean. You can resume the slides. The next slide, please. There we go. So why do we have to care? Well, it's not just that plastics are harmful to the environment, but they're also harming our personal health. Next slide, please. So here's an example of a baby albatross that its mother was feeding it plastic, and it took up all the room in its stomach, and the baby got no nourishment and it starved to death. Next slide. They're also harming marine life. Plastic bags, fishing nets, the animals get trapped in and die from all the plastic that we're dumping into the ocean. The next slide. Plastic follows ocean currents and ends up in other countries. The United States is the largest plastic consumer on the planet. And so all this dumping away of plastic ends up in somebody else's backyard, because remember, plastic never goes away, just goes somewhere else. Next slide, please. Now, plastics do not, and it's not just that the animals are eating the plastics, but we're eating the plastics also. And we're eating them in the form of microplastics, which are, when the plastics breaks down, it goes into tiny, tiny little pieces of plastic. So how much plastic are we eating? In 2019, the World Wildlife Federation did a study, and they determined that we're eating approximately 5 grams of plastic a week, which is about the size of a credit card. So I was curious and I thought, okay, well, kind of what does that look like overall? So if you look at the summer months, so just the past 3 months in the summer, this is the amount of plastic that we have consumed in our bodies. Now multiply that by 4 and you will get an idea of how much plastic is in your body. We can go to the next slide. So here's a picture of what microplastics are. They're in our food, they're in our air, they're in our vegetables, because actually the roots of vegetables can absorb these plastic and take it right into the plant. We are finding microplastics. The Arizona State University is looking in, they found microplastics in the organ tissue from an organ donor bank. And they find these microplastics are present in our liver, in our kidneys, our lungs, and they even cross the blood-brain barrier. Now, we don't really understand yet what effect they are having in our bodies. They've just estimated that we have about 74,000 of these little particles that go through our bodies each year. Now, they are found in stool, so there's a chance that we are excreting them, but we don't know the accumulative effect yet of what these little plastic particles will be doing to us. Now, we don't know exactly what the physical plastic microplastics are doing, but we do know that the chemicals in the plastic are harming our bodies. Let's go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so in 2012, the CDC did a study and they found that there are over 400 chemicals are present in the average US adult. A fourth of these are known to be cancer carcinogens, cancers causing agents. Some of these chemicals are used in plastics, the ones that we've already mentioned, like BPA and phthalates. They are what is considered endocrine disruptors. Now, endocrine disruptors, the endocrine system deals with your hormones. So hormones are messengers in our body. Examples would be like insulin is a hormone, and it regulates your blood sugar. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter. That's a hormone. It regulates your mood. And also estrogen is another hormone that we all have. So when you interfere with the functioning of the hormones, you put them in balance. So if you interfere with insulin production, it can lead to problems like diabetes and obesity. If you're going to interfere with your serotonin levels, you're going to have problems with anxiety or mental health problems, and estrogen. So to understand this a little bit better, these chemicals they look like natural estrogen, and the body doesn't recognize the difference. So much so that we call them pseudoestrogens. So they can accumulate in your body the way natural estrogen would. For example, a woman, if females have too much estrogen in their body from this buildup of chemicals, they can have problems with fibroids or for infertility problems, birth defects, breast cancer, if it's hormonal induced breast cancers. In men, high levels of estrogen can lead to infertility, low sperm counts. They can affect penile size. They can decrease penile size, increase breast size. When they've looked at areas in water with amphibians and reptiles where there's a lot of endocrine disruptors in the water system, there are like alligators that don't have they're not able to mate because of this disruption with these endocrine disruptors, and also in frogs. So we're seeing it in nature, the effects of these hormone disruptors. Other chemicals that may show up, and I just saw this on the news this past week. I don't know. It's been on the news quite a few times that sun care products are being pulled from the market because they contain benzene. And we've talked about benzene before. It's a known carcinogen. And then Johnson & Johnson, the makers of the lotion, the suntan lotion, don't put benzene in the lotion. So they were interviewing this scientist, and they asked, well, you know, if the manufacturer's not putting benzene in the product, how are you getting benzene in suntan lotion? And her answer was from plastic production. It's a ubiquitous substance, and it's showing up in the lotions. It also shows up in other of our personal care products. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. Okay. Another chemical commonly used in plastic production is BPA. The CDC has stated that there are 93% of adults in America have BPA. And BPA is also one of those 300 chemicals that is found in adults. Now, workers have 1,000 times the concentration of BPA found in the general public. An example of that is if you work with a cash register and the sales receipt, that thermal paper that the receipt is printed on, that contains BPA. And we can measure the amounts of BPA in your urine and directly see the effect that it's having. BPA is also found in the lining of canned goods. It's also used in water bottles. And it can leak into our food, especially when heated. So the problem is, like if you have a plastic water bottle, you don't know where that water bottle was before it entered your home. So if it was sitting in a hot dock, if it was transported in a hot truck, if it was sitting out in the sun, with the presence of heat, that enables the BPA to leach into the fluid. Next slide, please. Now, you may find products that will say that no BPA is contained. Now, remember, BPA is a hardening agent. So we need, when we're manufacturing plastics, we need to add a hardening agent to the plastic in order for it to have its form. So what they're doing, instead of using bisphenol A, they'll use bisphenol F or bisphenol S. They keep the bisphenol group and they just substitute some other chemical onto that molecule because they still need a hardening agent. And some of these products that are being used to substitute are worse than the BPA. So claiming that it doesn't contain the BPA is not a guarantee that it's not been substituted by yet another harmful chemical. Now, studies in JAMA, which is the Journal of the American Medical Association, have looked at BPA. And in August of 17th of 2020, the JAMA. And JAMA is a publication that is used by physicians. It's a peer-reviewed research that is shared. It's been around for 130 years, and it is considered one of the premier research references for physicians. And I'm going to quote to you what they have found when they have researched, done studies with BPA. Given the wide range of potentially toxic effects of BPA in humans, it is imperative and important to minimize human exposure to BPA. And that's from the August 17th, 2020 article. Next slide, please. Now, when they did this study, it was a 10-year study in which they had 4,000 participants. And they looked at mortality rates in people, and they found that people who had high levels of BPA in their urine have about a 50% greater risk of death than people with low levels. So BPA was a direct contributor to their mortality. So the presence of BPA is an indicator that you potentially could live a shorter life simply with that chemical in your body, the effects that it's having. Is this really the price we're willing to pay for the convenience of a product? So, and I need to emphasize here that when you're dealing with plastics, it's not just the harm of the actual plastic itself, the actual physical plastic, but it's also the chemicals that are used in the manufacturing of the plastics, as well as the chemicals that stick to the plastics. Plastics are like magnet for chemicals in the environment. Next slide, please. So in order to take personal control over plastics, we can control the amount of plastics that we consume, the amount of plastics that we use. So by refusing, especially single-use plastics, so when you go to the store and you refuse a plastic bag, you refuse to drink out of plastic bottles, water bottles, refusing plastic straws, simply by refusing using these single-use, easily disposable products, we can reduce our plastic consumption by 40%. Next slide, please. Reducing everyday consumption of single-use plastics is a small but simple step in the right direction towards reversing the damage from plastics to our personal health and to our environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think we will probably hold the questions till the very end so that Dr. DeMarco can go next, and then we can have both speakers address any questions or engage you guys in more conversation. So please, Dr. DeMarco.
Thank you so much. I am going to share my screen. And I presume that you've all read or have seen the story of plastic, which preceded this program, and have a clear understanding of the burden that the plastic industry is placing on our Earth. We use a plastic that's designed basically forever for products that we use for only minutes that have a very short useful life in our current usage. And I think we need to be aware that this is not a technology issue. This is a moral and an ethical issue that calls all of us to look carefully at how this problem came to be and what our role is in solving it. So we realize that plastic is in everything. We discard 33.6 million tons of plastic a year in America alone. Only 6.5% of it is recycled and 7.7% is burned in trash to energy facilities. China no longer accepts materials with more than 1% contamination for recycling in their country, and therefore most plastic waste is now deposited into landfills. And this, even the amount that is recycled is very small. Only an extremely small part, 0.1% of all of the virgin plastic is still in use after being recycled once. One time around, it will usually go to the incinerator or into the landfill. And there's only about 2.5 tons out of the total 8.3 billion tons produced that is still in use. And this is mostly in structural materials like PVC pipe or things that are embedded in structures. Pyrolysis or incineration of plastic is not a solution to the plastic waste because it produces greenhouse gas at the same time that it produces electricity, and it produces a lot of volatile organic compounds, including dioxins that are toxic and that are contaminants to the environment that make people sick. And Dee has just described to you some of the health effects that come from these materials. Some states have legislatively defined energy that is made from garbage as a renewable resource. This is a very undermining trend because it gives you the illusion that plastic is a renewable resource and that incinerating it captures energy from a renewable source. But in fact, it just contributes a tremendous amount of toxic material that came from these fossil resources. Plastic incineration is responsible for 4.6 million tons of CO2 equivalent worldwide. And the emissions from landfill are also toxic. In the United States, landfills emit methane equivalent to 148 million tons of carbon dioxide in 2014 alone. And that methane is 28 times more potent as a greenhouse gas. It has only a 12-year life, though, as opposed to a 200-year life for carbon dioxide. So reducing methane emissions by reducing the amount of methane formed in landfills has an immediate and rapid effect on reducing the greenhouse gas by reducing that contribution from the methane that comes from the decomposition in a landfill. We'll come back to that in a bit. So one of the things that is concerning me intensely as we're looking at oil and gas use declining due to climate policies and climate actions. We're all looking at shifting to renewable electricity and removing gas from our cars and removing coal from our electric production. But the industry has been seeking new markets by shifting their oil and gas production to plastics instead. This is actual plastic production in millions of tons in 2013. And industry projections to 2050 are that it'd be going to 1,800 tons per year from 200. So I want to look a little bit at what gives the industry this kind of advantage. This gives you a look at how much the use of plastic has increased since 1917. And you see that this first inflection point comes right after the end of the Second World War. A lot of the industrial capacity of the wartime for making munitions was shifted to making petrochemicals after the war. And so we began to see better living through chemistry, an increase in the use of plastic. And that has just been escalating over the last 20 to 30 years. There are a number of industry advantages embedded in our laws. Fossil-based fuel stocks appear cheap because they're heavily subsidized. The rights to extract minerals has supremacy over surface rights like preserving farmland and preserving ecosystems. And the profits go to corporations, but the costs go to the taxpayers, the costs of cleanup, the cost of health effects. And also the costs are not reflected in the product price. And the industry marketing creates demand for products you would never think of using. And I'm sure if I gave you this assignment as I give my class, list 10 things that you absolutely do not need that are made of plastic that you have in your house. You can do that exercise on your own. You'd be surprised what you find. Another issue is that The industry predicts that petrochemicals will grow from 16% of oil demand in 2020 to 20% by 2040, and then continue to expand after that. Greenhouse gas emissions from the plastic life cycle already threaten our ability to keep global temperature rise below 1.5 degrees increase over the initial initiation of the Industrial Revolution. If the industry projections are met, by 2050, greenhouse gas emissions from plastic could reach over 56 gigatons, 10 to 13% of the entire remaining carbon budget for the whole globe. That's as much as 615 500 megawatt coal plants. The economic reality is that business as usual, oil and gas development will doom our global chances of reaching climate abatement to the 1.5 to 2 degree range. Our projections, if you look at the Energy Information Administration, have no departure from this line because they do not incorporate into their projections anything that isn't already cast in law. And our laws have a long way to go to make this U-turn in policy, to make our actions match the goals that we need to reach so that we have a viable planet beyond 2050. And plastic prices today are really cheap. And this has a number of consequences. Industries that are looking at investing in plastic are seeing weaker returns on their profits than they were expecting. But it looks really cheap to make it so that it's attractive. Also, places like Taiwan and Europe have lower prices of virgin plastic than the US. So we have competitive disadvantages in other places in the world. The plastic resin is very inexpensive compared to alternatives because it's produced from byproducts of making fuel. It isn't the primary objective itself. That will shift if this marketing strategy goes forward for increasing the use of plastic to generate more revenue for the industry. And there is an oversupply of plastic worldwide. The build out in especially China and Asia has made sharp declines in the feedstock prices that don't increase demand for petrochemical end products. The North American fraction of the production of plastic is really swamped by much cheaper operations in China, especially in Asia, because they have fewer regulatory controls and they pay lower wages. So the industry, like the petrochemical complex that was proposed for Delmont, Ohio, has been facing stiff competition from major companies, especially in other countries. They have expanded production in other countries, and they have existing relationships already in the US market. They're not interested in adding competitors from a Taiwanese producer. Any new project that is intended to come into our region will face vigorous and devastating competition from existing global petrochemical operations. Also, the economic reality is that there is a slower growth curve projected. You see here, this is Northern America, the oceanic islands, Latin America, the Caribbean. Africa is still growing and Asia is still growing, but is expected to taper off. The International Monetary Fund suggests that this will have an impact on both volume and prices for plastic. Population growth worldwide is slowing. And if you read my article about endocrine disruption, I discuss a little bit about why that is a consequence of some of the activities that are going on, which Dee has described to you earlier. The demand for plastic is supported by industry marketing, not the actual need for materials. So we are really looking at an industry that is frantically arguing, buy more of my stuff, because otherwise I'm going to go broke, okay? This is a very encouraging sign to those of us who are hoping to have solutions to this problem. The economic reality also is that the 20 companies that are both large oil producers and large plastic producers have been facing bankruptcy. In 5 of the past 7 years, the oil and gas industry ranked last among all sectors of the Standard & Poor's 500, and it fell to less than 3% of the total value of that index at the end of 2020. And since 2015, nearly 800 exploration and production oil field services midstream oil and gas companies have filed for bankruptcy with a debt load of more than 300 billion. And since 2014, a mere $1 barrel change in oil prices would mean 3,000 jobs are lost. So the fortunes of the oil and gas companies are no longer gold-plated stocks anymore. They're facing a lot of real challenges in the real market. Sorry. So there's also a great deal of global regulatory uncertainty. Federal policies that are becoming more and more serious about addressing climate change pose a risk to the traditional industries that depend on extraction and production of fossil materials. Half of the fuel burned to generate heat for industrial processes where natural gas and coal and oil are used now can be replaced with electrification from renewable sources. And competitive performance from wind, solar, battery, and fuel cell technologies has already shown cost effectiveness in a competitive market with oil, gas, coal, and nuclear power. And you can go to the Lazard industry review of life cycle cost of utility scale industries and see that that data is correct. This is a global climate strike as part of the Fridays for the Future movement in Cologne, Germany, and it was very influential in bringing attention to the need for climate action. And the floods that they've been enduring these last couple of weeks have just amplified this attention all over the world for better and stronger regulation of greenhouse gases. The industry is not on the side of history in this event. They're recognizing that now. So let's look at the solutions. First of all, public pressure for effective policy changes must continue and become even more urgent. Manufacturers must be held accountable for both the production and the disposal of their plastic materials. This is not the consumer's burden alone. We must make sure that the industries and producers of this material look at the effect that they're having on the world. This is a plastic spill at a bottling plant in Austria that was asking Coca-Cola to switch to reusable bottles instead of single use. These kinds of actions take place in order to call public attention to the actual responsible parties. There are only 20 companies that make plastic. Surely the world can bring them to heel. We need to end single-use plastic production. The use and production and disposal of single-use materials has to stop, but the industry is spending millions and millions of dollars to prevent this from happening. The 5 majors here spend an average of $201 million for the top 5 companies annually to stop climate lobbying. And you can see it happening right now in the infrastructure bill debate that's going on in Congress. There is a massive oil industry and petrochemical industry opposition to effective climate action in Congress. We need to have voices louder and stronger and more numerous to counterbalance this kind of effect. Also, we federally subsidize fossil fuels very heavily, over $447 billion to the oil, gas, and coal. And this much is to the nuclear industry. Oh, sorry. And this very small sliver is the subsidies to renewable industries. We need to eliminate the annual $20.5 billion per year in direct production subsidies to oil, gas, and coal. And we need to eliminate the favorable treatment in our regulatory practices to fossil extraction. And that includes permanent investment tax credits for oil, gas, and coal of 7.4 billion a year. Those that are offered to the renewable energy industry are very, very much smaller, only 5.93 altogether between 1994 and 2009. And they have to be renewed every 5 years, and it's always a big production to try to have that happen. These are cast into the law, they're hardwired, and will need legislation to reverse these tax credits and these subsidies. It is cast into law as opposed to executive action, so it will need legislation to reverse them. And then we run into this same lobbying objections to changing the subsidies and the favorable treatment. We need to create zero waste communities and move from a linear material management system where we go from resource extraction to manufacturing products, distributing them, and selling to people who are urged to buy more stuff all the time to keep the economy running. All of that goes into the waste stream and causes not only the waste of the resources that were extracted, but also pollution and health harms that result from that pollution. We move to a circular materials management system where you begin with responsible policies that protect the environment, and we have clean manufacturing processes that are designed to capture and reuse and recover materials so that you don't use raw material, but continue to use material that can be recovered without toxic byproducts. There are a number of programs of this kind where discarded materials are considered resources and they're not burned or buried, but are recovered and reused by design, by design. And there are some legislative initiatives going forward. There is House Bill 5845 and Senate Bill 984, the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. This would ban common single-use plastics, including plastic bags, styrofoam, carry-out containers, plastic utensils, straws only by request. It would expand the market for recycled plastics by creating minimum recycled content and impose a 10-cent deposit on containers sold. In the 8 states where there is a 10-cent or even less 5-cent bottle deposit, the amount of recycled material recovered from the beverage sector is 85% compared to 3% nationwide in other states. So a bottle bill deposit actually works. If we did that at the federal level, it would help a lot. And then most important, you create an extended producer responsibility, which makes the industry responsible for the waste that it creates by requiring that producers design, manage, and finance programs to collect and process the waste that would normally burden state and local governments for waste disposal. This is the key point. This is critical. It is put forward now with many supporters. I don't know if they have bipartisan support yet, but it is the kind of thing that will make a huge difference in our ability to deal with this problem at the source. And we have to connect all the fossil industry operations to climate change. It is a time when we have to start planning for a zero waste system, shift the subsidies, design for safe environmental management and clean production and distribution, and empower the consumers. Look at making resource recovery centers out of former industrial sites and ensure that you have producer responsibility. And all of this makes jobs that are good for people and good for the environment as well. So we need to start by changing the rules of the game, getting rid of the things that empower the fossil industry to continue combustion and destruction. And we have to keep the fossil fuels in the ground by law. So we need to become empowered consumers, use your dollars and use your voice. You can refuse single-use items, and Dee has talked to you about that some. You can reduce the amount of plastic you use, buy in bulk, substitute recyclable and non-toxic materials for non-recyclable ones, select refillable products, reuse them, buy recycled materials and replace them with reusable items. Participate in exchanges, toys, clothing, household decor. You can exchange them instead of throwing them away. And know the rules of recycling properly in your area so that you can separate clean items in ways that can actually be moved into a market. And finally, compost. Food waste and organic material that would otherwise go into the landfills and become a source of methane when it decomposes. If you make it into compost, it can regenerate the soil and add carbon capture to the land instead of putting it into a methane producing decomposition mode in the landfill. Use your voice. We have to become advocates for policy change at the local, state, and federal level. It's very effective. This is a student protest in advance of the Colorado ban on single-use plastics. It had passed, both the House and the Senate, was signed by the governor. It has an exemption for small stores with 3 locations or fewer, but it does have a tremendous effect on the majority of single-use plastic production in the state of Colorado. And I must remind you that we have a moral imperative to preserve the living earth for the next generation and for our own children. The laws of nature are not negotiable. You can pretend that we're making progress, but if you're doing that by suppressing the natural forces of the living earth that give us fresh air, clean water, fertile ground, and all of the things that we need, the biodiversity of species that form the interconnected web of life, we cannot go forward unless we protect the living earth, which is our only home. I can't leave without a quote from Rachel Carson. You all know me, right? The road we've long been traveling is deceptively easy, a smooth superhighway on which we progress at great speed, but at its end lies disaster. We must take a different road. We have to craft a road forward that lets us live in harmony with nature instead of in destruction of it. Thank you so much. Do visit my website if you want more information. I think you'll find a lot of stuff there, and I will share this in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. DeMarco. So I believe that we will be opening it up to questions. I know that there was some chat in the chat box. In particular, the last question was whether or not the bills that Dr. DeMarco listed were U.S. Congress or federal, and
federal. Those are federal bills in the U.S. Congress. Yes.
Are there any other questions for either Dr. DeMarco?
Senator Udall is the principal sponsor for the Senate bill, and I'm not sure who in the House. I think Representative Markey.
So two people to thank. We don't always get those opportunities, but it is important, actually. So Mary's asking how to change what can make its way through the legislature.
Well, you know, all politics is ultimately local, right? So you have to get involved in making sure that the people who represent you know what you think. And that means your local council person, your state representative, your state senator, your governor, your federal representative, your federal senators. You should know all of those people. They should be on your speed dial, okay? You should be able to zap them at any moment and tell them what you think. And if they are doing and taking a position that you don't agree with or that you think is not going in the right direction, it's your obligation as a citizen to make sure they know that you don't agree with them and make sure they know that you're watching, because we have all of those moneyed interests that we have to counteract. But they don't have that many votes, okay? They only control the marketing. If we actually take up our responsibility as citizens and treat this as an existential crisis that it is, and a moral obligation to the next generation, we'll be on the phone all the time to these creeps. It's only about 52 people in the federal Congress that are holding up progress. We need to vote them out. That's all. Vote them out.
Pam was asking, what are the bill numbers to look for, specifically probably?
Oh, I can put it back up. I'll put it on the screen.
Kathy, who is our outreach coordinator, development coordinator, wrote, invite your representatives to a PIPL lobby meeting, and that you can contact our policy manager, Amani Reed, at policy@paipl.org. Honestly, if you want a specific meeting with a specific state, local, or federal representative of any form to talk about climate change, climate justice, environmental concerns, tell us. We will set that up. We will do everything that we can to get them on a call with you. And I mean this as either a Zoom call that we can host and we can train you in advance. Generally, we only have about 5 or 6 people on those calls so that it doesn't overwhelm the kind of session with the elected official. Or we can also set up in-person meetings when they're either in the district, or if you live close enough to Harrisburg or don't mind going down to DC. But the point is that if you have somebody that you think could be persuaded, you have somebody that you want to thank, you have somebody that is just on the wrong side of things, let us know, and we can set that up for you very, very soon, probably.
You can also, at the more local level, change your own behavior. So, if at your local church, if you're using disposable plastic products, stop doing that. Bring that up to the parish and say, why are we using styrofoam plates and cups for our meetings? When I'm sure all these parishes have tons of dishes there. In your own home, you can stop using plastic, stop serving plastic products when you have cookouts. I mean, there are things you can do right today, right this minute. Just stop using single-use plastic. Also, when you purchase clothing, stop buying polyester. That is synthetic plastic clothing. If it's not cotton or wool or silk, it's made of plastic. And then when you launder those clothes and put them in the dryer, those fibers break up and get into our waterways and contaminate the air. So by your own practice, you're going to affect change. You're going to affect change on the people that you interact with your grandchildren. Don't ever serve your kids or your family members bottled water. I mean, don't have it at parties. Just don't do it.
So a few things. Amelia Carr wrote that COVID-19 has really been a windfall for single-use plastics. They won't let you take your own bags into the store. Philadelphia actually just outlawed plastic bags in all commercial stores, and they haven't yet started fining companies, but I did notice that when I stopped by a Target the other day, that Target did not have plastic bags. They only had canvas bags to provide me. I will also say that earlier in COVID, there was definitely a stronger push for plastic bags and not using your own tote bag or something like that they wouldn't pack it for you. But I do find that now people will let you bring them and they will let you use them. They just won't pack them for you so that they don't touch your bag. I will say that 2 of the best investments that I ever made to remove plastics were for my 2 young children. We don't have any plastic cups that they ever drink out of ever, period. They are all ceramic or metal. And we also have metal reusable cleanable bottles, so they get all of their water from metal or ceramic. And then for myself, I have this small roll of recycled plastic container that has all wood and bamboo utensils inside, and I carry it with me everywhere that I go. So I never, ever, ever use any plastic utensils anywhere I go. And sometimes somebody will say like, "Oh, do you have a fork?" And I'm like, "Yes, I do," because I just happen to have this little pouch of utensils with me. I just found that, yeah, there you go. Dr. DeMarco has the same thing. It has a straw. Yeah, I have the same exact one. Has a straw, a knife, a fork, a spoon, chopsticks, a cleaner for the straw. It has everything. Exactly.
And the knife actually works.
Yes. I mean, I can't tell you how many thousands of utensils I would have used over the last several years, especially during the pandemic. And it does take some time to think, like if I order Chinese takeout, for example, to tell them don't put the plastic in the bag, right? Or to try to figure out ways in which I can use a reusable bottle or reusable containers whenever I buy food out or things like that. But by and large, if I eat out at a restaurant, I will usually have some container with me so that I don't take their styrofoam or I don't take their plastic container. It really doesn't take that awfully much to start doing it, but it becomes a habit pretty much.
No, you do not underestimate the value of street theater. I see people asking about the plastic clamshells that are accumulating more and more in the grocery store. You can bring your own reusable mesh bags, dump your strawberries in there, put it in your grocery bag, and leave the plastic clamshell with the produce manager. You can take it to them, pile them all up and say, I don't want these. I bought your vegetables. I weighed them and priced them. They're in my cart. And you can take these plastic containers back. What happened to the cardboard ones that were compostable? And, you know, if you are interested in street theater, I do workshops on street theater for reducing consumer plastic in the stores. And, you know, it's also useful for things like buying milk or cream that don't have carrageenan and a lot of synthetic additives in them. There's a lot of synthetic material put into things like ice cream and milk and cream to make it creamier. Just start reading the ingredients and asking the manager, where's the cream that says milk, cream, and nothing else? You can do a lot of really interesting things like that. I usually, if I'm in the right mood, I will take advantage of a time to make a production out of it and encounter the production guy, the poor produce manager who's just putting things on the shelf, becomes the foil for this kind of instruction. But usually you get 5 or 6 people around you asking questions and paying attention. And it's, you know, it's kind of a relief of the boredom actually. But you can try that, you know, it doesn't hurt to share what you know and to ask questions. But having the things go back to the producers is the only way they're going to take it seriously.
And a lot of people ask me when I pull out that little pouch that Dr. Marco had as well, they say, "What's that? Where did you get that from? How much does it cost? I want one of those." Like that's
They're
the
only
conversation that happens.
$6. They're not expensive.
Yeah. I was also going to say, when I went to Villanova was during the transition where we went from all styrofoam and plastic everything to everything was made of sugar. So all the forks, all the straws, all
Yeah.
like all made out of either corn or sugar product. So there was no recyclable bin anymore because there was nothing to be recycled. It all was compostable. You put it into the trash with your food, and it all biodegrades with all the food that you just ate as well. Anything that was left over just dissolves over time with moisture and other sources. I do see some other comments. I also really appreciate in France that they would charge you for every bag that you take.
Mhm.
It was like 10 cents or something per bag, but it definitely discouraged me from ever buying any bags when I went to the grocery store.
You can get really attractive little things. This one is a bag. You can carry it around for just stuff that you buy, you know, it expands out to a bag. I've had this for maybe 5 years and I have 4 of them. I just sort of keep them in my purse. And if you have an incidental purchase that you didn't expect, you know, you're going to the market, you just need something, you can just whip out a bag. They sell the kind that go in your back pocket for the guys if you don't want to carry little strawberries around. Chico makes a whole bunch of them. They're not very expensive. And some of them are made out of recycled material as well. This one is. So you can, you know, participate in the recycling operation as well and have a way to just completely remove these things from need. You don't really need them. And I think about, you know, I was alive in 1957 or 60. I don't remember feeling particularly deprived by the lack of all this disposable plastic stuff. I don't remember feeling a sense of deprivation and incapacity of functioning because I didn't have plastic everything. So this has really been infused into our culture by the deliberate marketing of an industry whose interest it is to make us buy things in order to throw them away and buy some more. This is insane. This is not sustainable. We have to stop it.
Yeah, absolutely. I also just wanted to add real quick. There were several people that I got emails from while we were on the Zoom that said that they did not get the link. So if you do know somebody who registered for tonight and never got the link, please tell them to email me. I will send them the recording. and I will also send them the link to the film. I don't know what the discrepancy was because more than 70 people registered, and I know those links went out, but I don't know if I didn't get a notification what happened. So my apologies to anyone who was not able to attend or didn't get the link, but it's definitely possible to still view it, to see the wonderful presentations and to see the film in the next week or two.
I have an inquiry about the plastic containers for dairy materials, and it's frustrating, especially for yogurt. My sister-in-law actually went to the point of making yogurt herself in a quart glass jar, and it's better, and you can do it fresh and keep it, and put whatever you want into it. And so I've started doing the same. So you just do it in a mason jar, and you add rennet and make yogurt yourself. And it's like sourdough bread. You take out 2/3 and leave 1/3 in, and then fill it up, and then it turns into yogurt again in 2 days. So there are recipes for this online, and it works really well. You can use half and half and make really rich yogurt if you're being really decadent.
I use heavy cream to make ice cream.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, ice cream.
It makes it really creamy. Just to tie things into a religious perspective, for myself, I was thinking today, especially about the fact that tonight actually is Eid al-Adha for me, and it's supposed to be the celebration of sacrifice, particularly related to Abraham and his son Ishmael. But for Muslims worldwide, it's also meant to be a time of simplicity. So when people finish Hajj, they are all dressed the same. They've all cut their hair. They're all living a simple life for the time of Hajj. They're all doing the same thing. And I think that there was a quote that I saw earlier flash by in some way about humans are the one species that need to go wild again. Like we need to go back to the simplicity of using the earth as it is, not trying to make it into something that we want it to be. And I like Dr. DeMarco's point about like a lot of us didn't have tons of plastic growing up, and I definitely grew up in an age of plastic, but I definitely appreciate being able to pick up my milk bottle and a glass bottle and have that in my house and be able to reuse it over and over and over again for a company that's willing to put that effort in. And there's a lot of companies that if you pressure them will. So I think as both speakers said, like our contribution is important, but it's also our contribution in pressuring both the political and the industry side of things to make the kind of tectonic shifts that are long-term effective measures. It's not just recycle your plastic. It's not just don't use your plastic. Do those things, but also do what you can to shift everything else.
Yeah, use your voice. I mean, if all of us get together and insist on this, it's a matter of educating our peers and colleagues and children and the people we interface with in schools and in our organizations and in our places of work. I mean, talking to the procurement officer, I mean, it's not cheaper to buy things constantly for the purpose of throwing them out. In the long run, you pay in the end. We pay with our health, we pay with our earth. And we have to start calling them out. We have to start calling them out. There is no way we're going to be able to survive on a planet that's habitable if we keep doing what we're doing. We have to stop and do something more productive, more resilient, more sustainable, and ultimately better. I mean, if you're living in harmony with the natural world, you're going to be healthier, you're going to have different jobs, but excellent jobs, and you're going to have a greater value to your life because you're not going to be suffering all of these diseases and disasters that are becoming endemic in our world. It's just not necessary. It shouldn't be a requirement of your job that you get sick.
I think that actually absolutely plays into also the ethical obligation to one another, that if we don't see ourselves as expendable commodities that can just be tossed aside, like the people who are getting sick by working in these industries or the people that are living near these industries, it's just thought of as it doesn't matter. There's more people to follow them. There's more people that will take their jobs or live in those places down the road. But if we're actually valuing human life, if we're actually valuing nature, if we're actually being stewards of creation, that that means that we have to do something to make that effect in the world around us. And plastics is definitely the one that we participate in every day nonstop and can actually remove from our lives a little bit easier than trying to switch over to solar tomorrow. That's a bigger project, right? But like, stop using your plastic utensils seems pretty simple in comparison. I just want to catch these comments that are coming in. Street theater idea, yeah. Maybe we should do a demonstration, Dr. DeMarco. We should get all our IPL chapters to go to a grocery store and pile up all the plastic outside.
Yeah, just give back all the packaging. That would be great. A flash mob plastic session at the grocery store. I love it. I'm in.
That would be really cool. I like that, right, Pam? Let's do that.
Yeah, I'm in. Kathy, you organize it. I'll show up and promote it.
You know what we should do, Dee, is go to the Amazon distribution center and just like all the. Have you ever had a package come from Amazon that is a package inside of a package inside of a package
with bubble wrap around it?
Yeah.
They're doing a demonstration again tonight. They've been demonstrating ever since the first one.
All wonderful comments in the chat. Thank you. Flash mob Amazon. Yeah, exactly, Mary. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I think that would get press, right? I mean,
oh sure.
Hopefully none of us get arrested, but you know, if we're just saying we're returning your plastics, and also a lot of them have those like recyclable things outside, you know, like either where you put your plastics or you put your bags. But imagine if you brought an entire congregation's plastics and put them all at the same time. The symbolism of like, we don't really want this, like giving it back to them. I think that would have some.
People have started putting their plastic containers in the grocery store in an empty cart at the exit, and just take all those clamshells and put them in a cart in the front of the store as you're leaving. And I've seen a couple of times when I've been to the Monroeville Giant Eagle that there's a cart in the front with stuff piled in it. And I thought, oh, this is really cool. You know, of course, I don't buy very much of it because I tend to buy my vegetables in bulk and things. But it's very difficult to try, you know, to really avoid plastic dispensers. It's very, very difficult.
I really wish that we could get, there's a few stores like this, especially in Europe and a couple in America, where like your cereal is all in that one chute and all your fruits are just out. And like I really want us to get to a grocery food store dispensary where everything is just kind of out the way it used to be.
Yeah, you know, East End Food Co-op does that. They have little, you know, disposable dispensers that you can put your own container in. They even have a tearing system for the weight. So if you bring mason jars, you can fill them up with rice and cereal and beans, and you know, they can weigh them, you know. Yeah, the East End Food Co-op.
I'm seeing our board member Bill Cousins smirking at my suggestion of getting arrested, so I'm taking that as a tacit approval of my maniacal plans to get arrested outside of an Amazon somewhere.
If there are enough of you, they can arrest all of you. I mean, we sat down on Fifth Avenue and stopped the streetcars for Earth Day when I was a graduate student. There were over, you know, hundreds and hundreds of students. We just sat down on the streetcar tracks and everything piled up in Wilkinsburg. And they couldn't arrest all of us. They put a police cordon around the area and just watched us for the duration. We sat there singing. And if they tried to ask us anything, we don't say anything, you know.
Yeah.
So maybe we should take our PA IPL board retreat to the nearest Amazon warehouse.
Exactly. This is a bad example of what you're talking about, Dr. DeMarco, but the naked bike rides that take place in Philadelphia and across the world, that's also the same principle. Is it's like a few thousand naked people on bikes, so the police just let it happen, because how do you arrest several thousand people who are zipping by on a bicycle? It's pretty much impossible. So
I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, I never heard of that either.
Yeah, I experienced it firsthand once in Philadelphia, that I was sitting in a park and suddenly just 5,000 naked people just went by. I am not, Bill, suggesting that PA-IPL do that, but I do think that I would like to see us as an organization make more potent symbols in this way, and I think that you know, plastics are one that we can do. And I also saw another thing the other day that was saying that non-recycled plastics, like the ones that like no one will basically recycle in America, this one company is using compression and heat to create bricks that are stronger than concrete. So you basically can't shatter them with a mallet or by dropping them or anything else. So they're using all the non-recyclable plastics to create a brick, which then just goes into a wall and is not contaminating anything, and it is not in a landfill. And it's a startup company, but I'm curious to see if something like that can take off. But as Dr. DeMarco said, the jobs will be different. What we do and how we live will be different, but it will be better for us in the long run. So to be cognizant of the time, we're approaching 8:30. Thank you all for coming, and I hope that all of you were able to see the film. If you can't find your link, or you haven't seen the film, or you would like to have a viewing event between now and the end of the month, please reach out to me at info@paipl.org. If you haven't gotten this link in the next couple of weeks, also feel free to nudge me, and I will make sure that myself or our new administrator will send it out to you as soon as possible. And if you would like to have those lobbying visits, please let me know as well. Was that somebody speaking up? Sorry.
David, I had a quick question. It's Bill.
Yeah.
Will either Dee's or Patricia's slides be available?
Yes. Mine will be available right away. I'll put them on my website today in PDF form, and I'll put that in the chat again.
And we'll also send that out as an attachment with the email that will include this video.
And when would the recording be available for us to watch?
About a week to 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
Usually we cut off either end of it just so that it isn't
Condense it.
sloppy.
And then do you just send it to us, or how do we get that?
So you'll get the email that will say, click this link, you already registered for it, and it'll take you to our website where you will be able to open it and view it.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you all so much. I hope that you join us in trying to remove as much plastic from our environment as possible. And thank you so much for both of our speakers for your wonderful presentations. It's always a wonderful experience with both of you. So without any further ado, good night all, blessings, take care.
Thank you, David.
Good night.